Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about summoning mechanics in general, and we'll be going over, well, all of them. Well, the ones that are uh, mostly relevant, I suppose. So, in terms of if you're a new player, what summoning mechanic is actually the worst, I suppose, or the best, depending on your perspective? Well, we'll go from left to right. So, starting with, I suppose, link summoning. Link summoning is going to be uh easy-ish, but not really. It depends on the exact link deck, but for link decks, there are a lot of different things that you have to keep track of. So you need to keep track of the extra monster zones, link arrows, and then you also need to be aware of the material that is listed on your link monsters, and this varies. So, for example, we have one level 4 Lord Plant monster here. We have two ninja monsters, two pendulum monsters, including a Magic Spectre monster, and even if we do something like SP specifically requires to be link summoned with a Fusion Synchro Xyz Link Monster as material to trigger the banish effect on summon, which would not happen if we, for example, used like Hanzo plus Aluber for whatever reason. Then it would just special summon SP, and SP also has bad arrows, so you would have to link off the SP if you want to do any further link summoning. So that could get a little bit complicated, but still on the easier side of things, and we'll see where it stacks later. It's not the absolute worst thing, but there's also, I guess, with like, for example, Appaloosa. Appaloosa says 2+ monsters with different names except for uh, tokens. So some people just can't really understand it, like the amount of link arrows and then how this mechanic works with requiring 2+ monsters. So if we use like a link 4 plus a link 1, does that make Appaloosa? Some people might say yes, and that is wrong. So with things like that, it does make it a little bit more difficult for people to just get into link decks immediately. Then next we have a fusion deck. So for this, we'll go to Aluber, and here's the problem. So for example, branded Despia and all that, pretty good deck, but this doesn't really show off like how fusion summoning really works at its core. Like at its core, we used to more or less have to do it this way. So we need to get our materials just somewhere, usually on the board or in hand. So we'll need like two guys, and then we need a spell usually to perform the fusion summons. Some archetypes had like just the monsters and no spell, but you would then use those guys to make a fusion monster from your extra deck. That was the basic concept, right? And then eventually we cut out like the middleman, we cut out like some part of the mechanic, and then we cut and cut, and then eventually we end up with stuff like Tearlament as well. So now you can use material from literally just anywhere, and you can also just shuffle back your material for later if you think about it that way. But basically with Tearlament, we just don't even care where the materials are, nor do we care about a fusion spell. So that's like two mechanics down the gutter. So not every fusion deck is like this, but it's getting to the point where I don't even know what to do with these, right? So if we go to Yubel, we also have, of course, Phantom of Yubel. So with Phantom, this is just technically like one step worse than Shirin, because you can contact views from literally anywhere. So this means with no chain, I can shuffle back guys from my graveyard, my hand, or my field, I'm pretty sure, right? Yep. and then it just summons Phantom of Yubel for whatever reason. So I guess that's a thing now, you know, just contact fuse, so it starts no chain, and then you instantly put out a fusion monster or extra deck monster with material from like pretty much anywhere. Cool, I guess. So, uh, depends on the exact deck, I suppose, but honestly, fusion summoning still definitely not the easiest. I think we can say that. And then if we go to synchro, so Sword Soul does exist, yes, but synchro summoning has so many aspects to it. It's actually pretty annoying. So it has, I guess, somewhat the same issue as like Link monsters, where we need to keep track of a good amount of things, but this is probably easier than Link summoning, simply because we only have to keep track of tuners, we don't have to keep track of zones and things like that, right? So in terms of that, I think synchro decks in general are going to be a bit easier to play than Link decks. And fusion decks, I suppose, don't have to keep track of zones either. You you don't really have to keep track of that much. So it's pretty close to I guess like synchro in general, but with fusions, typically the thing is you also need to play the fusion spells and know how to get into the fusion spells. So you have to do that, get your monsters, and all that. So I would put fusion summoning a little bit above like synchro summoning as well, I suppose, in terms of difficulty for a newer player, right? And then with just well, it doesn't have to be Sword Soul in general, but with synchro, like we need to get our tuners essentially, or perhaps in this case, our tunas. But basically we need to keep track of our tuners. So if we go to, for example, well, in terms of pure synchro decks, I can't think of any off the top of my head. I guess like that would probably be something like a synchron, I guess. So we have like Jump Speeder and stuff. The speeder not show up here, or am I just blind? Okay, there we go. So we have a lot to keep track of, like with uh levels and tuner non-tuner. So in that regard, you could argue it's a little bit harder than Fusion, where you don't actually need to keep track of your cards' levels. Levels are pretty much never relevant in Fusion. And that is something else you have to keep track of. You have to actually be able to do like the level math for this, which is a little bit more difficult than like link summoning or fusion summoning. Like for example, if I have Baron here, right? And then we'll have I don't know. Let's get a more generic monster. Let's get Brightus, if I could ever figure out how to spell that. Okay. Branded. And then Aluber, I guess. Related cards. Brightus. So all I need for Brightus is any Dystopia monster plus one light or dark monster. So this is simple enough to make. All I need is some kind of fusion effect. And then a Dystopia monster. Easy peasy, right? No issue summoning that up properly. But then let's say we have Baron de Flor and I want to make Baron de Flor. If I do not have the right levels, I can't really make Baron, right? So if I have like 7 and then like a 4, that's like a Psychic End Punisher, level 11. If I have like 5 plus 3 or 4 plus 4, that is 8, and that doesn't really make the Baron. If I kind of want to go into Baron, right? And as a newer player, it wouldn't be a surprising thing if you just were playing a deck and you were just thinking like in terms of if I make X, Y, or Z monster, one might say, then you might be thinking, huh, if I made Baron, I can break this board, I can pop that, and then I can like negate that back row, and then I'm like completely fine. And I'll be able to also use this to insulate my plays and do whatever, right? So this would not be that easy in regards with like making or bringing out like a Baron. So in that context, like just making an asshole to like clear a board, synchro is not necessarily the best for that. And I guess like in terms of that, like XYZ, you have Zeus, so you can just make Zeus whenever. So that's another somewhat friendly, well, new player friendly thing we got going here. Like make Zeus is pretty simple as an option, and you can just do it like very whenever. All you have to do is make like essentially an XYZ monster. So that works out pretty well, I guess. And also with links, I guess, having to keep track of the material, you have to keep track a little bit more than typically Fusion or XYZ. So that's another downside. And then needing specific monsters to be able to go into like specific link monsters sometimes. That is also technically like another downside, I suppose. Depends on the exact deck where it's relevant, but it is what it is. And then I guess let's grab one more XYZ archetype here real fast. So let's go with this, this, and this. So if we were to go to looking at XYZ here, XYZ actually has a lot of advantages. So XYZ summoning specifically requires uh, two monsters with the same level or more. It depends exactly, but in general, we're going to just need two guys with the same level, and we're going to be able to make our XYZ monsters. So this mechanic is usually the simplest, simply because with all of our extra deck XYZ monsters, they're probably the majority of them are going to be the same level or same rank, and therefore our deck is going to be running like only one level of monster because it's logical. So for example, with Kashtira or Time Thief, we're running either all level 4 monsters or all level 7 monsters. So in this case, whenever we want to make something from the extra deck, this is a little bit more simple, but of course, once again, you don't have as good of, well, great. I guess this is something that every single, yeah, every single summoning mechanic kind of suffers from, is needing specific monsters to access something sometimes, but with XYZs, at least your extra deck, if it built properly, it should just be pretty much things you can just access whenever. And in terms of accessibility, I think XYZ probably wins it. So yeah, if I want to make something for my extra deck while I'm playing like an Xyz deck, I'll probably just be able to make it with any two monsters, essentially, right? So that is a privilege that we kind of have that other decks might not have here. Like, if I don't have Long Yon or access to Long Yon here, we won't be able to make our Baron or our Hanging with the Despian cards here, or yeah, Despia cards. We won't be able to activate or special summon Quiritis unless we have like a Despia monster or whatever. But with our Xyz decks, we just can use practically just any two monsters to start accessing whatever we want from our extra deck. And also we have the option to make Zeus afterwards. So if we just focus on just the basic mechanic and don't focus too hard on the archetypes, I think currently leading us will have to be XYZ, and XYZ is probably going to end up being the best. just simply because of the nature of how the summoning works, right? Like if I want to make Renewer, and the deck is like basically pre-built for you at this point, probably, right? So essentially like a structure deck or something like that. Uh, you might not know the combos, but the access to the extra deck is going to be pretty straightforward. It's going to be two guys, and then you just XYZ summon with them, right? So that's pretty simple, and not that much needs to be done. And a benefit to this that some other decks do not have is that if we go to like Ninja, for example, the way this deck interacts with other decks, it being mostly like flip based, requires like extensive game knowledge. And Mirror Jade doesn't require that much game knowledge, but it requires a bit more. And then like in terms of interaction, I guess that's not relevant to the mechanics that much, but just wanted to throw that out there that certain removal is just going to be harder to use for like newer players because they just don't fully understand the rulings, and yeah, there are a lot. So once again, do not recommend Ninja for new players. Don't do it. Do you hate new players? Do you want them to quit? Come on. Anyway, if we were to just XYZ summon, it's just two guys, which is pretty free. And moving on, we have pendulum summons. So with pendulum summons, that this is going to be a little bit problematic. So at a basic level, why starting with like pendulum summons is a bad idea is because pendulum is very intertwined with link summoning. Just before we even consider like more aspects of pendulum, just like how technically you can have a pendulum effect and then a monster effect. Don't even bother considering that yet. Uh, we need to learn the mechanic for pendulum summoning. We kind of also have to play around zones and do everything Link does. So it's essentially Link plus, you know? So if we were to start as a newer player and have to learn pendulum summoning, we also have to learn Link summoning. And of course, if we go a little bit more deep into it, that means we have to keep track of the link arrows, we have to keep track of pendulum effects, pendulum zones, and then we also need to keep track of course, our main monster zones, play around those properly to not mess up your pendulum summon later. And then we have to be able to keep track of our monster effects. So that is a little bit rough. So this is definitely not recommended for new players. I mean, if you really want to play it, no one's really stopping them, right? But just if we're trying to go with like ease of access here, Megaspectre, or not Megaspectre, Pendulum, definitely could not recommend Pendulum. There are some jank Pendulum decks now, like Valmonica, but that's not really teaching the mechanic, which is like a sort of issue with some of these newer newer decks, I guess, newer archetypes. It The issue is that they're not really teaching the mechanic to a newer player, so you can't really understand how the mechanic is supposed to function. So there's that aspect as well. Like for example, with like branded dropping branded fusion or a Tournament dropping a Shirin into graveyard, or like Bell fusion summoning from the graveyard or your hand or wherever as contact fusion, which is just something that's somewhat unique to those decks, which makes it kind of like rough. But with XYZ summoning, for the most part, aside from like XYZing with only one monster to make an extra deck monster, uh, yeah, that I think XYZ is probably going to be uh better than everything on this list, honestly. But finally, we're moving on to ritual summoning, and ritual summoning has like the ninja issue and also the synchro issues of needing levels and stuff, which is kind of annoying. But it's also like got the fusion aspect of where you also need essentially a ritual spell or fusion spell, same vibe to summon your guy. So it combines the worst aspects of like the worst aspects that you have to keep track of for a newer player. So you need like the levels for synchro summoning, and it kind of has the same vibe as needing a tuner, I guess, because you do need a ritual monster as well to ritual summon, and then you need like a fusion spell, or in this case, a ritual spell to ritual summon, and then you need the material or materials or whatever. So it is like quite literally might as well be two different summoning mechanics combined, similar to like pendulums. But this is also like currently the worst summoning mechanic in fact that it hasn't gone like really strong. We haven't really gone really strong like ritual archetypes or decks in general. So yeah, that's where that goes. And also if we're playing actual ritual deck, so none of this Drytron business, which dodges all of the ritual rulings you need to know. Uh Gotta hate these cards honestly. So let's say, for example, we have our Ophiel here, and we have in our hand Hawk, Phalag, and Bether. And we want to special summon Bether, but we want to definitely send Phalag, and we want to send Ophiel. Can we do this? Can we make Bether like this? No, we cannot because we have Auk in hand. And because we have Auk in hand, we're required to use Auk as material. And that is because we have this lovely text here. Well, this text doesn't actually mean anything, I guess. During your main phase, you can activate this effect, ritual summon a ritual monster from your hand by attributing monsters from your hand or a field, including this card, on your field whose total levels equal or exceed the level of the ritual monster. So, the thing about just rituals in general, you have this disgusting ruling that still exists now, where you need to, if it is possible, like your opponent can't even necessarily confirm this all the time, but they just have to trust you in real life, I guess. Where if you can use equal, you can't do exceed, essentially. So in this case, it says whose total levels equal or exceed the level of the ritual monster. Yeah, sure, buddy. So technically, if we did not have Auk in hand, we can do like Ophiel, Phalag, tribute these two to special summon Bether. No problemo. But if we have the Auk in hand, we are actually required to do Ophiel, Auk, to summon either Bether or Phalag. This is literally required. And that's just how the mechanic works. So there's also, for example, if we have a level 7 monster and a level 2 monster, a ritual spell, and then we have a level 8 monster, and the only ritual target that we can ritual summon is a level 8 monster, we can never use the 7 or 2 in this hand unless the level 8 card wasn't in our hand. Then we would be able to ritual summon using the level 7 and 2 monster as material. So if that ruling doesn't make sense, yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either. Like, why does why does this exist? Who does this help? No idea. So this is like the same vibe as like, oh, you want to link off like this monster for SP, but sorry, Bozo, you cannot link this guy off because it is a link 1. You must use the higher link. So link off like I don't know, your format Appaloosa to make SP Little Knight with your I don't know, other boss monster being like a rise art. Yeah, you must do it. Sorry, bro, I don't make the rules. I know it says like 2 effect monsters, so you thought you could use any 2 effect monsters, but no. We're getting rid of your Arise Heart and your Appaloosa off your end board to make this SP. Oh, you don't want to make that speed? I guess that's fine. You do you. I mean that's the same kind of energy that ritual summons have. It's actually maddeningly annoying, and there's also like the aspect of well, with link summoning, it's not fully into effect, except with like cards like Apollosa, I guess, or certain fusion monsters that allow you to use multiple cards. But another aspect of ritual summoning that sucks here is if I want to get like certain cards into the graveyard, I can't do, for example, uh, in this case, if I want to just do a ritual summon, and I have, for example, once again, we have Hawk, Phalag, and Bether, and then a ritual spell to just generically ritual summon. If I want to go use Aka's material first and then Phalag to summon Bether, I cannot. I have to do Phalag into Bether or Bether into Phalag. Those are my only two options with this hand. In terms of ritual summoning, we can never use like Ak as part of a ritual summon in this case, right? Despite it uh, allowing us to technically, well, use whatever, it says equal or exceed, but if we can hit the equals in this case, it's going to force us to use Phalag. So if in this case, like Phalag was level 7 and not 8, then in that case, or we just had a level 7 monster in general, then we'd be able to summon Bether using Hawk plus the 7. But because Phalag is 8 and meets the whole requirement, we can't use Hawk as part of the ritual summon. So can't tribute. And that's just more rulings, more things to think about. So in terms of being, uh, head empty, brain off, XYZ summoning all the way. So you're just going to be main decking like all of the same level monsters, and then your extra deck's just going to be mostly the same level, plus Zeus. So simplest summoning mechanic by far. So if you're going to recommend a deck, please recommend an XYZ deck to a newer player. And they're the simplest for that reason. I mean, if we're just looking at learning the game, it's easiest to simplify and use like the use the simplest mechanic to learn the game first before we can branch out. And in terms of the most useful information for uh for the other summoning mechanics, that I don't think there is that much in terms of just like transferable skills. Like if I were to just start off playing an XYZ deck versus someone who started playing a synchro deck, we're not really going to be any better than the other person, I don't think, when it comes to like the fusion summoning mechanic or the link summoning mechanic. It's not really going to be much different. So there isn't much overlap in in yeah, in any way, shape, or form that I can think of. Except for if you did like fusion to ritual or ritual to fusion. That might be like a little bit transferable. But yeah, that they don't share that much uh in the way that these guys work. Aside from like we use main deck guy to bring out extra deck guy, summoning mechanics don't really share that much in common. So yeah, there's really not a whole lot of well, transferable skills or overlap in terms of uh extra deck summoning mechanics or just summoning mechanics in general for the most part. Well, I guess with link summoning, I guess you're essentially just doing link summoning and uh pendulum summoning, which is just, uh, kind of transferable to links, I guess. If we go pendulum to link, that there are some transferable skills there, and like messing around with your main monster zone, like managing like all that stuff. So yeah, uh, that's all I got for you guys today, and hopefully, if you're new, pick up a XYZ deck of some sort, and that's probably the mechanic you should be looking at. So yeah. That's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.